The period between 1877 and 1900 saw intense conflict on the plains, with one of the most notable events being the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876. This battle, also known as Custer's Last Stand, became emblematic of the larger struggle between the United States government and indigenous peoples over control of the plains. The battle occurred in the context of increasing tensions as settlers encroached on lands guaranteed to indigenous tribes by treaties, particularly after the discovery of gold in the Black Hills, a region sacred to the Lakota Sioux. The U.S. government, eager to open up the area to mining, sought to forcibly relocate the tribes, leading to a series of confrontations that culminated in the Battle of Little Bighorn. The defeat of the U.S. Army at Little Bighorn was the result of a combination of factors, starting with the leadership of Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. Custer, a flamboyant and ambitious officer, led the 7th Cavalry into what would become a disastrous engagement with a coalition of Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. Custer's decision to attack what he believed was a smaller, vulnerable group of indigenous people proved to be a fatal miscalculation. In reality, he faced a much larger force, estimated to be around 2,000 warriors, led by leaders such as Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. Custer's underestimation of his enemy's strength and his overconfidence in his own abilities contributed significantly to the catastrophic outcome. Custer's commanders also played a role in the defeat. Custer was supposed to coordinate with Major Marcus Reno and Captain Frederick Benteen, who were leading other segments of the 7th Cavalry. However, Custer's failure to clearly communicate his plans and his decision to divide his forces weakened the overall effectiveness of the U.S. Army. Reno and Benteen, operating under vague orders and facing significant resistance, failed to support Custer effectively. Reno's assault on the southern end of the indigenous camp was quickly repelled, and he retreated to a defensive position, leaving Custer without reinforcements. Benteen, who had been sent on a reconnaissance mission, also failed to reach Custer in time, further isolating him from the rest of the cavalry. Bad luck played its part as well. The terrain at Little Bighorn, with its rolling hills and ravines, was unfamiliar to Custer and his men, putting them at a tactical disadvantage. Moreover, the timing of the battle was particularly unfavorable for the U.S. Army. The indigenous forces were at the height of their power, with many warriors gathered together for a major encampment following a sacred ceremony. This concentration of strength and unity among the tribes was rare, and it meant that the U.S. Army faced a level of resistance far greater than what they had anticipated. The role of the indigenous warriors cannot be understated. They were fighting not only to defend their lands but also their way of life against a government that had repeatedly violated treaties and encroached on their territories. The warriors, skilled in guerrilla tactics and intimately familiar with the terrain, outmaneuvered the U.S. soldiers. Leaders like Crazy Horse inspired their men with fierce determination, and the sheer numbers and coordination of the indigenous forces overwhelmed the divided and disorganized U.S. troops. The warriors were also better equipped than Custer had assumed, using repeating rifles, bows, and arrows effectively against the cavalry. The Battle of Little Bighorn was a significant and symbolic victory for the indigenous peoples, but it was also their last major triumph. The defeat stunned the U.S. government and the American public, leading to a relentless military campaign against the tribes. Within a year, many of the leaders who had participated in the battle were captured or forced to surrender, and the U.S. government intensified its efforts to confine the indigenous population to reservations. The defeat of Custer became a rallying cry for further military action, and by the end of the 19th century, the power of the Plains tribes had been effectively broken, leading to their forced assimilation and the loss of their traditional lands. The Battle of Little Bighorn remains one of the most significant and tragic events in the history of the American West, symbolizing both the resistance of indigenous peoples and the eventual conquest of the plains.